So welcome back to another video from Grounded. Kind of still recovering from a bit of the old COVID. So I've had COVID since last Wednesday, so a week. Today still feeling the effects of it though. Quite a nasty thing to catch, but I've dealt with it well, my body's dealt with it well. I feel like an important thing to talk about in this video, one of the reasons why I believe I caught COVID, is because my body's been really run down of late, and I noticed it with my skin because I have very mild psoriasis, which is like a skin disease. I think it might even be a skin disease, and it can be generational, meaning it can come hereditary through the genes. My mum suffers from it, but yeah, one of the signs that my body's been in a state of stress is that's been flaring up. But I want to talk a little bit about grieving your childhood, and that's exactly what I've been going through for the past 4 months, grieving childhood. And what that looks like is when you become so accountable for your emotions and for your feelings, which means that you're no longer blaming anybody. You see, when you stop blaming, then you come into accountability, which means you become responsible, and you understand that the emotions I feel now are not from, or are not in the present, but are from the past. And so I've been doing this work as I've become more spiritually evolved, become more conscious, become more self-aware. I've become more aware of my trauma. Unfortunately, this is the nightmare of awakening, is that what you awaken to is your trauma. What you awaken to is your pain. What you awaken to is your suffering. And this is what I've referred to as the blessed curse, because then it's releasing the trauma to allow you to be more enlightened. So you can have, I gained enlightenment at 29 when I had an out-of-body experience. I became aware of pure being. I become aware of consciousness itself. But we can have these mystical experiences. Gino, come on. These deep, profound awakenings. Come on, Gino. But that doesn't automatically mean that the awakening is going to override everything that is within you. Because if you look at your body is basically an intelligence on its own. If you just look at the physical body, it is the product of evolution. And so if you look at DNA is what you could also class as memory. And so you can have a deep, profound awakening. You can realize God in one moment, but don't ever believe any spiritual teacher or anybody that ever tells you that once you have an awakening there's nothing else to be done. Because the true work that has to be done is within the body, is with clearing the trauma contained within the cells, within the DNA, because that's where trauma is stored. It's stored in your DNA. And so you're not just dealing with the trauma of your life, you're dealing with your generational trauma. And so this is the work that I've been doing now for 5 years, since I had my awakening. Don't get me wrong, I have deep states of peace, deep states of deep inner knowing that this is a healing that I'm going through. When you're awake, there's that conscious awareness. You're always consciously aware, and so you're aware of a greater intelligence you're aware that you are this greater intelligence, purifying this body, purifying what you've suppressed. So I've suppressed my whole childhood for 30 odd years. And when you suppress something for so long and it's unconscious, meaning you're unaware, it takes time and it's a process. And so for the last 4 months, consistently, I've woken up in emotional pain. I've lived my day-to-day life carrying the emotional pain, feeling the emotional pain, creating space for the emotional pain, to be there, not to try to get rid of it. There's a level of understanding of what the pain is, understanding it, because you're able to see it, you've got to acknowledge it, you've got to see where it's coming from, you've got to see where it has its roots. But so much of our pain is so deeply suppressed within us, it can be very hard to see. And so, as we go through the awakening, we go through healing, a lot of it, and the majority of it, most of it, is actually about creating space for the trauma, for the pain to be there. The more you do that, the more it begins to, through the acceptance and the acknowledgement, the less resistance there is to it, because you're constantly bringing that acceptance. So there's less resistance towards the emotion, and then the emotion can begin to come up. So I've probably purged about 6 or 7 layers of suppressed emotion. So you have the original core wound, and then on top of that it builds other wounds. It's like the main wound then gets build up of scar tissue, and them scar tissues are other wounds. So you have to go through the layers of the scar tissue to get to the original wound. And so, just as an example, a few of the layers that I've had to pass through, one of them, because actually when you release one of these layers, you're stepping into that childlike aspect of yourself. You're actually crying and releasing from that child perspective. And so when you're releasing these traumas, you can actually feel the childlike you. You actually can acknowledge that this is a child aspect that you've been suppressing. So just a few of the ones that I've suppressed and I've come to acknowledge. There was a lot of guilt because of how I treated my mum, because obviously my mum was very emotionally numb to me, so I built up I resented her. And that resentment, there's also pain in resentment, because you feel guilty for resenting, so you suppress the guilt, the pain of actually of resenting. And then I had the pain of trying to work myself out. My whole life I've had this suppressed part of me. I was always trying to work myself out. Well, when that part released within me, it was like, why is everybody horrible to me? So this is kind of like, when this emotion come up, this is what it was conveying. It was like, why is everybody horrible to me? Like, I just love everybody. So you're starting to really get this like perspective of what you was feeling as a child. And so, I genuinely come into this world, like we all do, with this genuine, authentic love for everybody. And here I was being abused, emotionally neglected. And so while I was going through these experiences, I was asking them questions, what's wrong with me? And so one of the ways in which I was dealing with the way in which people was treating me was, I believed something was wrong with myself. And so, as a child, I was always trying to work it out. And then there was, I had this other realization that how I treat my eldest son was how I was treated. So, I was aware that I'm disconnected, and I don't mean to be. I couldn't help but be disconnected from my eldest. I kind of always picked holes in him and see his faults, and always made him wrong. And that's because that's what was happening to me. And so I'm releasing all of these layers, and then I get to this other layer, and it's like, I feel so alone. Now there's a part of me that I'm crying and releasing that just feels completely and utterly alone. And so this is what's happening when you're grieving your childhood. You're releasing all these different layers, and it takes time, and it's a painful process. Because before in my life I was able to escape my pain through addiction, through drugs, through going to the gym. But when I had my awakening, it forced me into seeing all of this. Hence why I understand it, hence why I work with so many people teaching and developing emotional intelligence, because I understand the process and I understand the pain of the journey. But you have to consciously choose to suffer now so that you can transform your whole life. And in truth, my life's been transforming since I had my out-of-body experience. My whole life's changed and my whole life's completely different now to what it used to be. But I just want people to know that for those that chase spirituality or those that chase something, whenever we're chasing something, it's because we're trying to avoid how we feel now. And unfortunately, what I've come to realise through my own awakening is the number one things humans are at war with, or what we resist, is feelings. Because when you begin to be accountable for your feelings, you're really awakening to the hell that you've been living in, and that's a very painful process. But that's what I do in my channel. I try to put as much information out so people can understand, and that you can have an out-of-body experience, you can realise God, but the work begins when you become accountable for how you feel. Anyway, to the next one, much love.